All right, everyone. Hello. This is Volts for November 26, 2025. What is the deal with balcony solar? I'm your host, David Roberts. In the late 2010s, Germany established the technical and regulatory standards necessary to enable what it calls Balkonkraftwerk, or balcony solar. Anyone in Germany, homeowner or renter, can simply buy a solar panel at their local hardware store, plug it into their wall, and hang it off their balcony. Or prop it up next to a tree in their backyard, or plop it on top of their shed, or whatever. A single panel won't offset a whole home's power, but it pays for itself in 4 or 5 years and provides a kind of satisfaction that is apparently irresistible. As of the beginning of 2025, something like 4 million balcony solar kits have been installed in Germany. The Netherlands, Austria, and Italy have seen similar booms. I am now completely hooked on how I can produce energy from the sun, one previously skeptical German homeowner told the New York Times. It has become like taking a drug. I ask you, listener, why should Europe get all the good drugs? Why can't we have this in the US? Well, there are people trying, but the bureaucratic and technical barriers are substantial. To talk it all through with me, I have the perfect guest, Cora Stryker, co-founder of Bright Saver, a nonprofit devoted to enabling what it calls plug-in solar across the US. There's been a law passed to enable it in Utah, and there's a push for legislation in several other states. However, there are other regulatory bodies that need to get involved, products that need to be manufactured, and so forth. We are going to get into all of it. With no further ado, Cora Stryker, welcome to Volts. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you so much for having me.
I will tell you, in probably the last year, maybe the last 2 years, this is the number one top request I get from listeners on what I should do a subject on. So people, as I'm sure you're aware, people's imaginations are seized by this, and people have tons of questions. So I'm very excited to talk it through. So just to start off with, something that I found weirdly difficult to figure out reading through all this material. This is just a normal solar panel, right?
Correct.
The panel itself, there's nothing special about the panel itself.
No.
What makes it special is there's a special inverter, a micro inverter that has all the intelligence and wizardry that makes this cooperate with a home system. So you cannot, it's weird, I felt like I was reading for hours before I finally confirmed this. You cannot just go buy any solar panel and do this. These are panels made for this purpose.
They're standard panels, so you can get them almost anywhere. I talked to somebody who bought them used at her local hardware store. So there's nothing special about the panels. As you say, what's special is the microinverter that connects the panels to a standard plug in your wall or to a battery, DC to DC, and then the DC is converted through the inverter to AC that your home can use.
So could I theoretically go buy like a standard panel and then go buy the microinverter separately and then make it into like a balcony solar panel?
Yeah, you could. I mean, that's already happening in Utah. We're already seeing DIYers do just that. There is a complete system available only in Utah, but people are taking matters into their own hands right away. And don't forget, this was a DIY movement in Germany for years before it became consecrated in law.
Were people just like programming their own little microinverters? Is that how people were doing it?
In Europe, people were just assembling these. I mean, but it was a very niche thing. It was sort of this tiny, tiny amount of folks compared to now. I mean, we're looking at 4 years ago in the thousands of these balcony solar units in Europe. And now we're up to, we think, about 4 million. It's a bit of an estimate. We can get into the nuances there.
I should say that's about 1 million registered,
That's right.
official systems.
That's right.
And up to 3 million people just doing it.
Yeah, we're told by our German counterparts across the pond. I mean, that's what they estimate. And it's fascinating what's going on over there. And it's a little embarrassing that we're so far behind.
But just to sort of put a period on this point, what you're buying when you buy a plug-in solar panel is just a normal, everyday solar panel with a special micro inverter attached. And
that's right.
Where these things are legal, you sort of buy that as a package. You buy it in Germany as a package. You can buy it in Utah as a package. And if you are clever, apparently, you can rig it yourself. That's what we're talking about. Is it's just a solar with a special kind of inverter that you can plug in home without doing damage. So let's start then with Germany's experience. So as you say, Germans had been sort of, at least, sort of niche DIY Germans had been doing this for a while. So tell us exactly what Germany legalized. Like specifically, what are the steps Germany took to make this possible and legal?
Sure. So it happened in two parts. So as I said, we're looking at about a decade of experience in Germany with these systems. But again, it was tiny. What really happened, two pieces of legislation. One in 2019, essentially exempting these systems from traditional interconnection agreements. And that is what Utah did earlier this year and what we are trying to replicate across the country. And a lot's happening even faster than we expected in our wildest dreams. But as I like to say, that's the speed of the climate crisis. So that's the speed we have to move at. So Germany had this two-part legislative process. The first was what we need to do first in this country, which is exempting these, creating a new class, a new legal class for these small systems under a certain wattage threshold. And after that, we saw an uptick in Germany, but the real explosion happened in 2024 when they passed protections for renters from landlords, essentially. So if you go to Germany, you're going to see mostly this adoption by renters, not exclusively. We do have homeowners that are doing this, but that's why it's called balcony solar.
And they all have balconies. If you've ever been to any European city, they're just balconies all over the place.
Yes, they're very lucky to have those. I covet those when I go to Europe. But yes, that it's this phenomenon. And really, this is how we hit the tipping point in this country. Your neighbor has it. You want it. You see it. You touch it.
Just to be clear, the 2019 legislation made it sort of technically legal to do this
Correct.
Without messing with your utility. And the 22 law said landlords cannot prevent renters from doing this, basically.
Yeah, in a broad brushstroke, that's right.
And then it blew up, and it's taken off.
Wrong metaphor for this technology, but yes.
Yes. So setting aside Utah, let's say you're in the U.S. and you wanted to do something like this, and you're not in Utah. Tell us the steps you would have to go through under current law to do this in the U.S.
Sure. Well, that's a much more complicated question than we thought when we started this thing back in January. So the answer is there's a manufacturer that sells in all 50 states in the United States right now. And the way they do it, and the way we were doing it in our pilot in California, is there's an extra piece of hardware. So these are very simple systems. Yeah. As you say, you've got your panel, you've got your microinverter, plugs into the wall. But in order to essentially fly under the radar of utilities, to essentially be invisible to the utilities, this one system you could order in all 50 states has this extra hardware at the last step to prevent any excess electricity from flowing back to the grid, making it undetectable by utilities. Now, that, according to the letter of the law, in every state we have become familiar with, is still... It's against the law to not go through an interconnection agreement for that tiny system. And as anyone knows who's installed rooftop solar, it's months of waiting sometimes.
Yes, I know. It's a big enough pain in the ass when you're getting a giant rooftop solar system out of it.
Can we use that language, David? Because that will... Fantastic, fantastic.
And so you would, theoretically, by law, you are supposed to do the same interconnection steps for plugging a single panel into your wall that you are supposed to do to put a giant system on your roof, basically, legally speaking.
Yes.
Okay. And let's talk about this backfeed prevention, because I'm a little hazy on it. So what you want to do, if you're going to do this in the US and you're not going to tell your utility, the way to be invisible utility is that your house is not feeding energy back into the system.
Right.
That is basically how the utility would detect that you're doing this, so you can prevent that. So what that means, I just want to spell this out. So that means you can only use the solar power that's being generated when it's being generated, right? So you're not feeding it back into the grid. The energy that is generated that you're not using at the exact moment it's generated just gets wasted.
Yes, unless you have a battery.
Unless you have a battery.
Yes.
And how can something, I'm going to betray my ignorance of basic household electronics here, but how could something you plug in a single outlet prevent the household more broadly from feeding energy into the grid? Do you know what I'm saying? I'm not totally clear how that works.
I mean, it's a really ugly workaround. I mean, we installed these here in California. We had to have a licensed electrician come out and install this clunky piece of hardware at the breaker box.
Oh, at the breaker box,
Yes.
not where you're plugging it in, at your box. I see.
That's right, which is a real pain in the ass because you need to get that licensed electrician out. The hardware is expensive. It just about doubles the cost from what it is in Utah today, and just about quadruples the cost from what it could be if we had German-style regulations.
Okay, so just to be clear, if you're going to do this today in any state but Utah, you have to tell your utility and go through the whole utility interconnection process, which, as Volts listeners know, can take weeks, months, and expense, etc. And then 2, you have to buy, along with your little panel and your little microinverter, a big piece of equipment that you attach to your electrical box that prevents the box from leaking any energy back into the grid.
That's correct. And these are sold as complete systems today. But yes, that's right.
And suffice to say, add those 2 things together, it doesn't make sense, really. Once you've added those, does it pencil out anywhere now other than?
It does. And I want to be careful here because we love rooftop solar. We love community solar. We love utilities. We're not denigrating rooftop at all, but does it pencil out? Look, right now, today, even with this clunky workaround system, this plug-in system, it's about $3 a watt, which is about our national average for rooftop. Of course, there are local variabilities. But so in a sense, it pencils out if you're in that group of people who want solar, but you just have no other options. And I want to be clear here because we believe strongly that if you, the individual consumer, you have a choice between rooftop and these small plug-in systems, you should for sure get rooftop. They're much bigger. They're much more impactful. However, not everyone falls into that group. So this is an entirely new group of Americans who, many of whom have been on the sidelines wanting solar and just haven't had an option. However, as I'm sure we're going to get into, it really does add up. If we're talking about these small systems at scale, it becomes significant. And that's what we have to push for.
And let me just ask this. If you've got the backfeed prevention, if you've got a piece of hardware that is preventing your house from leaking energy back up into the grid, then your system is invisible to the utility. So if you've got that, why bother to tell the utility and go through the whole utility interconnection thing? Are there people out there just doing this?
There are. It's happening. It will continue to happen.
And is anybody being like when you say it's illegal, how illegal? What is anybody being punished? Do utilities care about this? Are they out looking for this? I mean, how big of a deal is it really?
David, here's how muddled it is and how we really need to clarify this gray area. So we are in touch with, half a dozen folks who have actually, we're in PG&E territory here in the San Francisco Bay Area. We are in touch with folks who have called PG&E and described the system and been told by customer service representatives, no, you don't need an interconnection agreement. This is all behind the meter. We have had folks call and been told by other customer service representatives, oh, no, you do need an interconnection. So this is the madness that we really need to get around to make this a real thing.
From PG&E's perspective, if you've got the backfeed prevention, what do they need the hassle for? They're very busy. They've got a huge interconnection queue already. Do they really want to go through this big bureaucratic hassle with everybody who's got a single panel? I mean, I don't know how much their personal sort of preferences play into this, but
we have the same question. And we actually think in some senses, if we're going for total exemption, and that is what we're going for from interconnection, we're also taking net metering off the table. So in essence, the utilities are getting free electricity. We think they should be excited about this.
Yeah, I have a ton of questions about that. So Germany legalized this. It took off. And I'm going to just guess that there have not been any substantial, nothing's blown up. Nobody's caused any blackouts. Have there been any sort of setbacks or hiccups or anything that have dented the public impression of this?
In 10 years of adoption, no. I mean, there's been nothing significant reported.
Interesting. Okay, so that brings us to the U.S. here today. As you say, it's crazy. Talk about Utah then. So you found somehow this Utah Republican lawmaker and got in his ear. So tell us what happened in Utah.
Sure. So he initiated the process. We came in toward the beginning, but he read an article in the New York Times a little over a year ago.
Tell us his name real quick.
His name is Raymond Ward, Representative Raymond Ward.
Raymond Ward of Utah.
Otherwise known as... Yeah, I was going to...
A hero for solar.
Took the words out of my mouth. Yeah, we call him our hero. I actually introduced him at a talk recently as our hero, and he blushed a little bit. So perhaps we shouldn't use that word.
All right, I'll tone it down.
So he's really a visionary. I mean, he saw what was happening in Germany and he thought to himself, oh, great, I'll get one. And then he discovered pretty quickly, oh, I can't. And, he dug in, we joined up with him. And pretty quickly we figured out, okay, why there are these regulatory restrictions that we need to remove. And he's like, well, I'm a lawmaker. I can do this.
Wait a minute.
So yeah, we wrote the bill with him. It was a bit of a negotiation. Utilities we brought to the table from the very beginning, and they had a couple of requests.
So curious what the big utilities think about this. What did they say when you approached them?
Well, Utah has one of the lowest solar penetration rates in the nation.
Yeah, that's crazy.
So we don't have these traditional battle lines drawn. So we do, we're going to get to this, but we have 5 states that have already announced introducing legislation. We have another 5 that are waiting in the wings, waiting for their announcements. So in Utah, we brought the utilities to the table really early, and there were some things that they added to the bill. So they added release of liability. This is not a new technology. It's been in Europe for a decade, but it's new here. So the utilities wanted to make sure that they wouldn't be held liable for any
release of utility liability.
That's right. And a bit to our surprise, they weren't terribly concerned about this. I think they kind of saw it as a little, a little fly buzzing around. That it's niche. It's tiny amounts of electricity that could theoretically be backfed to the grid. But if we're looking at the average base load of an American home, most of, if not all of that electricity generated, even without that backfeed prevention, will be consumed on the spot just by, your refrigerator.
So I think from a utilities perspective, even if this catches on in Utah and gets reasonably big in Utah, the amounts of energy that might be coming into the grid collectively are they're not huge. They're not there's just no reason for the utility to be sort of scared that this is going to be destabilizing on any kind of scale, is there?
That's right. I mean, we don't think so. I mean, there are parts of the grid and parts of some grids in the United States that are at or near saturation. So that is something that we need to bear in mind. And we can get to sort of legislative approaches that we think are reasonable there. We think in almost every area, yes, we're talking about such tiny amounts of backfeed that we really are not going to be looking at grid instability issues. And even in those areas where we're at or near saturation, there's a bit of a debate. And that's, we're kind of the only game in town, in the sense that we're the plug-in solar people, and people keep coming to us with these questions. So one of the things that we're working on right as we speak is we've got, I call it my dream team of technical safety experts who are putting together a definitive guide on safety from 2 levels: household safety, line worker safety, and also grid stability safety. And so we're working with some experts in the field to produce that. It should be out in the next, I hope, weeks, possibly months.
Okay, so Utah just in terms of what Utah did, they shielded the utilities from liability. They exempted these systems from the interconnection requirement. What's the cutoff size? Like,
Yeah.
how big?
Utah chose 1.2, 1,200 watts.
1,200 watts. So give us a sense. Is that like a panel, 2 panels? What is the cap there?
If we're talking about 400-watt panels, we're talking about 3 of them. And yeah, the way the Utah law is written, it's a little ambiguous. Are we talking about generation capacity? The language is output. But again, that can be interpreted in a number of ways. So
you think roughly-ish, a Utah homeowner could hook up 3 panels and still not have to do an interconnection?
Yeah, it's happening today.
And so what else was there? What other pieces were important of the legislation? I mean, obviously the interconnection thing is the big thing, but what is it? Were there other important pieces in Utah?
The really crucial part is it enabled self-installation. And the sort of secret sauce of what's made this take off in Germany are a couple things. One is just the ease of installation. You can go to IKEA, pick one of these up, bring it home, plug it in, you're done.
You literally just plug it in. There is barely anything that even qualifies as installation. You're literally just plugging it in.
Oh yeah, it's dummy proof.
And so they had to explicitly say in Germany, this does not require an electrician. Like, do you have to make that explicit?
I'd have to look at the law again, actually. I don't believe they did make that explicit, but when you exempt from interconnection and you explicitly permit self-installation, it sort of implies that.
Right. So same in Utah. So Utah homeowners can do the same thing now that Germans can do.
That's right. And they are doing it. And
this is like Home Depot? Like who's where do you get these things if you're in Utah?
So in Utah, I just got someone forwarded me an email. Costco is selling them.
Nice. You knew they were going to get into it. You just knew it.
Well, listen, every retailer wants to get into this. I mean, it's this no-brainer thing. It's this huge market. They just see only one state, Utah, where they're not going to run into these regulatory quagmire.
So we've got a model now, Utah, and from what I'm hearing from you and from what I'm reading, it's a good model. Like they did it right. They did it the way you want them to, more or less. Yes?
Yes.
And so now you've got this white paper out that tries to model what will happen. Because right now, it's just Utah, which is a relatively small market, all things considered.
Sure.
And so you have this white paper analyzing what would happen if we pass similar reforms in 5 states.
Yes.
And then you've got some pretty eye-popping results that would come from that. But just to begin with, why 5 states? Like, why is that the threshold?
Yeah, 5 is not arbitrary. So we have talked to all the major manufacturers that are selling in Europe right now.
And can I cut in on the manufacturing? Are these the people who manufacture this, I'm guessing, are just like manufacturers of solar panels and this is one of their products? Like, this doesn't seem specialized enough that you would get like a company devoted to this.
The new one? No. These are the big ones. So 5 states is not arbitrary. We have spoken to all the major manufacturers and they tell us they need to see a bigger market before they're really going to invest in R&D and everything it would take to get in here, like they're in Germany right now. So they tell us about 5 small states, but listen, we have some pretty big fish on the table already, and we have even more we know are in the pipeline in terms of who's going to introduce legislation. We've got Pennsylvania, we've got New York. I mean, it wouldn't be 5 if we got one of these big fish.
Oh, I see. 5 small states, or like maybe New York and
one or two,
and 2 small states, right?
That's right. It's all about the TAM. It's, they need to see enough to invest and come here.
And so they've told you, if you get that big a market together, we'll start coming in earnest, stocking, marketing, selling here in the U.S.
Yes, that's what they tell us. And 5 is the floor, not the ceiling. I mean, the more, the more places,
of course,
the more manufacturers will come in. And that's really what we need to happen. I mean, we need multiple manufacturers here. We need competition to drive down prices.
And like the headline here, which is like, I really feel like should be put on a flag somewhere, is all you need is for this to become legal. None of this needs any subsidy
That's
or
right.
tax credit or incentive or et cetera, et cetera. You can just sell solar panels at market rates, and this will take off on its own. Is that your...
Yeah, absolutely. And I feel pretty psyched about that as a clean energy advocate person. I mean, it's like, look, what doesn't need subsidies? I mean, to me, we've really reached this tipping point for clean energy in which it truly is or could be the cheapest option for the consumer with the right regulatory framework.
Mm-hmm. Well, legendarily, they're sort of building fences out of it in Germany. The panels are so cheap in Germany that they're just like
I love that.
using it as building material. I know.
That's where we're headed, David. I mean, that is the frontier, right? Every new construction has PV materials that it's being built from.
So you project in your modeling that if 5 states legalize this and manufacturers come in, the costs will fall. The cost of plug-in solar will fall. From what to what?
Well, it's a stepwise function. So we start where we are today, which is around $3 a watt, generally on par with rooftop. Now, this is for the workaround system.
And this is the whole system plus the interconnection plus the electrician to install the that whole package.
Not including the interconnection fees. So this would be the full system, including the extra piece of hardware to prevent that backfeed to the grid. That's the one that's installed in the breaker box. In order to get in the breaker box, you need a licensed electrician. So This is the cost of, and we know this cost because we've done this in our pilot in California. I mean, this is the cost of the electrician and the cost of the more complex system.
Got it. So about $3 a watt now.
About $3 a watt, depending a little bit on labor costs for the electrician where you live. Basically on par with national averages for rooftop. So the day after even one state, let's say it's New York, let's say it's Vermont, the day after that legislation is signed into law, the system, the simple system that's available only in Utah, will come to that state that makes it permissible. So that's where, if you look at the takeaway graph in our white paper, I mean, that's where you get the big drop.
Wait, now I'm confused. Why is the Utah system so much cheaper? Is it the lack of the backfeed thing?
That's right. I mean, the backfeed thing plus the cost of the electrician, we factor that in.
Okay, so the day you exempt these systems from the need for a utility interconnection and you exempt them from the need from backfeed protection, those two pieces right there, that whacks the cost roughly in half.
Right, because a different system.
At a stroke.
Correct. Even in one state, we don't need to hit 5 states for that to be true, right? Because the system already exists. It's already in Utah. You just, and listen, I've gone on their website. I would love to have one shipped to me here in the San Francisco Bay Area. They will not ship it to me. I'd have to get it shipped to Salt Lake City, drive over, go on a road trip, bring it back, which believe me, I know some people are doing. But yeah, it'll be there immediately, overnight, the minute it's signed into law.
Okay, so that gets you to $1.50. You're talking about getting to 50 cents a watt. So that comes through what? Just competition?
Yeah, competition, scale effects. I mean, we really use as our key the historical trends. We look at Wright's law. I mean, the components continue to fall every year, right? The component costs. So we know that once we have multiple manufacturers into the game, that it'll fall in cost so quickly. And by the way, it sucks for them. I mean, it's a race to the bottom. In Germany, this is dirt cheap. They're not making great margins.
Yeah.
But it's great for us. It's great for consumers. Sucks for the manufacturers.
So you're just talking about kind of riding along on the learning curve that solar panels are already on.
Yes, almost.
And the system, like this is just what I'm trying to get at is like how much, like so much efficiencies have already been squeezed out of the panel itself. So I'm just wondering, like, what is the room for further advance at the system level? How complex is the system level here?
Well, we thought about that a lot in our white paper. We agree. We don't think we'll continue. Historically, as you know, we've seen about a 2-year doubling rate for solar panels and about a 20% learning rate globally over the last decades. We think that's probably not going to continue. We do believe the price will continue to go down, maybe not at that rate. The thing that we really need to consider is that these panels are so cheap that these balcony solar systems, a lot of the cost is like the mount, for instance. And those do not go down at the same learning rates that we see PV modules go down. So we're not expecting a 20% learning rate. We estimate in our paper about 14.
And the microinverter, how is that pretty straightforward too? Like probably not a ton of room there to squeeze out efficiencies or cost drops. I'm guessing the electronics are pretty simple, but I say that from a position of total ignorance, though.
Not total. You know a lot, David. Same thing. We see historically a more modest learning rate for inverters. So we don't expect 20% 2-year doubling time. We expect a little bit more modest than that.
Got it. So then let's translate just quickly the per watt costs, which is what we're talking about, to payback periods, because it seems like the people who write about this kind of thing are obsessed with payback periods, although have never been convinced that individual consumers care that much. But anyway, so at the current cost, pre-legislative reform, the payback period is what? It's got to be like 8 to 10 years now-ish?
Well, it depends where you are, of course. There are wild variations in electricity prices. So, depends.
And insulation and the amount of sunlight available.
Absolutely.
But the payback time is pretty long now, and it's going to get cut substantially. So if you pass the legislative reform, cut the cost in half. Right there, you cut the payback time to, you guys are estimating, around 4 years.
Around.
And then you estimate nationally by 2032 around 3 years. That's fast. That's faster than rooftop solar. That seems almost fast enough that it almost doesn't count as a payback period. You know what I mean? I don't even know how to put it, but that seems like that's a threshold that's going to trigger a lot of buying.
We think so. And we think actually it's a threshold not just for solar or plug-in solar, it's a threshold for the clean energy movement at large. Because when we hit that point where it's not a climate-driven choice, it's just straight economics, it's a straight rational consumer model. We think that we're just going to see this take off. And why shouldn't we? The cost of the energy itself is incredibly, incredibly low. So why shouldn't consumers benefit from those rock bottom prices of the equipment?
And I really think, and this is just me editorializing, but I think the experience of Germany supports this, that there is a backyard dad, nerd factor here. Do you know what I mean? That doesn't really kick in with rooftop solar, because that's mostly professionals doing that. You get to play with the screen afterwards and see how much power is coming in and going out, and that gives you some geeky satisfaction. But this is genuine DIY. Dad goes to Home Depot and he's figuring out where in his backyard to put it. There's a customer geeky satisfaction element here that I think is kind of a bit of an X factor.
I'm not a backyard dad. I'm not quite sure, but I take your word for it.
You know what I mean? Just like Suburban's dad they just love fiddling around.
Sure.
And they love fiddling around. And this is such something to fiddle around with,
It becomes an IKEA project. IKEA is literally selling these in Germany.
Yeah, exactly. So your projection in this paper is that by 2035, 24 million households involving 60 million people, 1 in 6 Americans, will have one of these things in their home.
We do.
And that's just, you're making that projection based on cost, demand, Germany's example, et cetera?
Yeah, all of the above.
That's amazing. That would be truly amazing. And really, I think part of this is, and this is also an X factor that you can't really quantify or predict, but I feel like part of this is just making people familiar with this stuff, making this stuff seem familiar and normal and around you. You know what I mean? I think that's going to do something psychologically for clean energy. It has in Germany already.
Oh, 100%.
So the big barriers in the US right now, as I read it, are kind of twofold. One is UL certification, which stands for Underwriters Laboratory. Yes?
Yes.
They're the sort of regulatory body that certifies consumer goods as safe. And as I understand it, they don't currently have a certification for this product. What is going on there?
Well, not exactly. I mean, it's in Utah, right? And so the way the Utah law is written is UL certified. Now it doesn't specify, are we talking about component level certification, which we already have. We have 1741 for the inverters, and we have a certification for the panels as well. What we're talking about is a third UL certification, which is for the system end to end. So the manufacturer that's in Utah, they interpret it as component level UL certification because it's left open in the legislation.
It's Utah. I mean, presumably Utah legislature, were informed about this and they're okay with that too.
That's sort of a legislative strategy question. I mean, we feel strongly that we have to write legislation so as not to constrain technological development as it may unfold. I mean, because if we legislate everything according to the technology that's available today, we have to go back to past. I mean, it's not a good recipe for free market dynamics.
Well, let me ask you this: the Utah manufacturers say the pieces of these systems are individually UL certified.
That's right.
So there's really no need for this third UL certification for the whole system. That's working in Utah. They're doing it. So who adjudicates that question ultimately? You know what I mean? Who decides? Is it the UL board that makes a decision? Is there any do they have any enforcement power? How is those questions settled?
Are you saying, could someone challenge Utah's law in court?
And who would, if someone wanted to say there's no UL certification for the system and I want to use that to challenge, I'm confused who they would challenge and before what body? Is it the UL council we're appealing to? Does anyone know?
No, I don't think there is no sort of gatekeeper there.
So if Utah decides to do it, nobody can come in and stop them. Hey there, everybody. Don't worry, I'm not going to tell you about a new mattress or push a credit card on you. This isn't an ad. There are no ads on Volts. It is supported entirely by listeners like you. If you'll indulge me for a second, I'd like to ask for your support. I started Volts because we're all surrounded by depressing news about climate change and misinformation about clean energy, and it's never been more important to share the stories of the real people on the ground doing the real work of transition and all the ingenuity and courage and public spirit they are bringing to it. People are hungry to hear these stories, to learn from and find inspiration in them. I've heard from people who changed majors or careers after hearing episodes of Volts, people using it in classrooms and community groups, even state legislators who have passed bills inspired by specific episodes. Sharing these stories matters. It makes a difference. If you have found value in it and want to help me continue doing it, I hope you will join the community of paid subscribers at volts.wtf. It's about the cost of a cup of coffee a month. If you don't like subscriptions, you can make a one-time contribution, leave a review on Apple or Spotify, or just tell a friend about Volts. I am grateful for any and all support. If you're already a paid subscriber, thank you. And now, back to the show. So if Utah decides to do it, nobody can come in and stop them.
To our knowledge, I mean, probably a federal law could stop them, but...
Well, sure, right. So you don't see this UL certification, this lack of UL certification for the system level, you don't see that as a barrier?
Not currently. I mean, if at the levels of adoption that we project potentially, but, UL is working right now on that third certification. We expected them to be out with it by now. It's gotten delayed.
Oh, so they are doing it.
They are doing it. They've been working on it for years, actually. And we're just waiting for them to release it. But yes, we feel it shouldn't be a hindrance in the meantime. And we feel that all the major safety concerns are addressed by this. I mean, so I was just talking to Daniel Gerber yesterday. He is authoring our safety memo FAQ. And, this is his wheelhouse. He wrote the definitive paper on barriers to plug-in solar. And he feels that at a certain threshold, he thinks the Utah one is a good one, 1,200 watts. we don't need to worry about these major safety considerations because we're talking about such small amounts of energy. Now, if UL comes out with different guidance, particularly for different use cases, the market will follow that. So we just don't see it as something that should be in legislation constraining technological development.
Got it. And you don't have any visibility into that, do you? I assume this is some council in a closed room somewhere doing arcane rites or...
Yeah, I mean, we have heard from them just in the last couple of weeks that they're going to be releasing guidance soon. Now, what does the word "soon" mean? It's up to debate. So we're waiting for it, and I think that when that comes out, there will be clarity. I think one of the hindrances, if we're talking about barriers, is this not just legal gray area, but certification gray area, and we are excited for that to become clarified by UL. Quote soon.
There's no chance of them like saying no or like there's nothing's going to come out of that that's going to like be a huge blocker.
We don't know what they're going to say. We don't think
knock
so.
on wood, I guess.
We don't think so. And if there is, there's always, product development which can respond to it, right?
Sure. So the second thing I always hear cited as a barrier is National Electric Code. Apparently there is a National Electric Code and it basically sort of has proactive, certifies various things, says various things are okay, and does not have anything in it that allows for the installation of plug-in solar. What's the deal there? Is that a serious problem?
So, again, there's debate. So the way that our technical team thinks about it, and we'll have this memo released soon, the way our technical team thinks about it, NEC governs the wiring of the house that you plug this thing into. But this thing is an appliance, and it is governed by consumer product safety certifications like UL. There are others, but UL is kind of the gold standard. So we see them as two separate issues. Now, that's because the Utah legislation that we're trying to replicate has total exemption and self-installation. So for a system that has to be installed by a professional electrician, yes, NEC would be relevant there. We're not changing the wiring of the house.
If you're just plugging an appliance in, you're by definition not touching the wiring of the house, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, think of a hairdryer.
Yeah, exactly. And this actually gets to, so one of the sort of physical safety concerns has been around this is what's called breaker masking. So every circuit, as people know, has a circuit breaker. And if a circuit gets overloaded, the circuit breaker automatically trips off. It's a physical, currently still literally a physical spring, clicks and the circuit goes off. One of the concerns here is if you're feeding energy back into the circuit, in addition to the energy coming the other way through the circuit, you're going to basically confuse the circuit and it might not recognize an overload when it's happening. This is called breaker masking. The way they solved this in Germany apparently is just the balcony solar are producing at such low level that it's not a threat. Is there any reason for us to dig into that any further, or is that a solved problem?
This is why we have to set the maximum output. I mean,
Right.
So yes, that is how Germany solves it, and pretty impeccable safety record there.
And their maximum output currently is 800 watts.
Yes, currently.
Which is, according to the New York Times, half the amount used by a hairdryer.
Right.
So really benign. Is it 800 watts in Utah too? Or you said?
No, it's 1,200 watts in Utah.
1,200.
Yeah.
But we still think that's still not even a full hairdryer. And the 1,200 watts is measuring the amount of power going into the home system from the solar panel. That is the limit.
That's right.
And, we have a decade of experience with 800 watt output, zero problems basically.
Sure.
And
Yeah.
so 1,200 is probably benign as well. The only other safety thing I was going to cite, and if you think this is like too trivial to cover, please say so. There's something in the US, we lack a ground fault circuit interrupter, a GFCI, all sorts of nerdy electricity stuff we're getting into here. Is this anything that is a breaker or a problem, or is this just a matter of like the producer, the manufacturer is going to start making these?
Yeah, the manufacturer will have to come out with a warning. So, for instance, going back to the hairdryer, the manufacturer's instructions say you have to plug that into a GFCI. I'll tell you, I have made that mistake a couple times. So we believe the manufacturer's instructions, if followed, will circumvent these safety concerns. But again, that comes down to the consumer certification, the UL, or whichever nationally recognized certification body, comes out with guidance on this. We understand why people ask these questions and are interested and want clarity, but our technical team doesn't see a huge risk there either at these low wattages.
So a ground fault circuit interrupter is just something that is in some outlets. It's just a part of the outlet.
Yeah, if you go to your bathroom, you'll see this, little red button on the outlets.
Oh, yeah, right.
Yeah, that's what it is. So when it trips, which it might, you can reset it by pushing that little button manually.
Got it. Okay, so Utah's in the bag. Vermont, Pennsylvania, New York, New Hampshire, those four at least have announced plans to do a bill. Are there other states that are in other various stages of?
Oh, yes, there are. I mean, one of the lucky things about being the only game in town, everyone comes to us. So we actually have insight into, there are 31 states on the
31?
map. 31. Well, no. One just came online yesterday, 32. 32.
Hold the phone, it's 32.
Yeah, and counting. I mean, so yes.
I mean, it's a Republican who did it in Utah. I mean,
That's
this
right.
is like, does anyone oppose this? Like, is there a faction or a movement, or is there any sort of organized opposition to this? And if so, why? Like, I'm trying to figure out who might oppose it and why, but I'm not really coming up with anything.
Well, I don't want to give any groups any ideas, David.
I mean, I literally can't think of a reason not to,
that's what we think. I mean, certainly most of it's mostly questions that are raised, and they're mostly questions you're raising. I mean, it's all around, hey, this is a new technology. I don't have it. My neighbor doesn't have it. Tell me about, what the risks are. I was going to say, yes, it was a Republican who did this in Utah. And we think that, in some senses, the time is absolutely right for us as a nation. Things are so divisive politically. And we really see this as, we think that this is caught on so quickly because it really does appeal to so many of our values across the political spectrum. It's really actually deregulation or regulatory reform, slimming down, it's climate,
self-reliance, et cetera, et cetera. And you're really rooftop solar gets at that a little bit, but like I said before, once you're really putting you're allowed to do the panel and put it where you want, plug it in where you want, that's real prepper crack. That's prepper crack right there. You're definitely going to get that crowd involved.
Well, yes, and it's not true prepper because we're not talking about off-grid systems. We're not talking about you're not in the woods. You're in a typical, urban, suburban home, that is connected to the grid.
In Germany, you are allowed to feed a little bit of energy back into the grid from these systems.
Yes.
You don't have to have the backfeed thing. And now that's true in Utah, too. But in other places, they're still requiring it. So I guess I'm just wondering about the physics. Is it just a matter of the amount of power that you might be feeding back into the grid is so small that it doesn't matter? Is that why utilities are okay with it?
Well, we need to test this state to state, right? I mean, in Utah, yes, they were okay with it. We don't know how anomalous that negotiation was. But that's a big question we have, and we are working with experts. And so far, everyone we've talked to about grid level dynamics has said these are such small amounts of electricity, such small systems, it really can't create any load predictability issues.
I see. And one of my questions was what if some rogue, speaking of handy suburban dads or whatever, what if some rogue person strings together 10 of these things and plugs them in the wall?
Yeah.
But that, I guess, that's where you get to your cap, your cap on the amount of wattage.
That's right.
Okay, so all these states are looking into passing legislation. Your organization has 3 recommendations for what to do in state legislation. You want to run through those three real quick? I think Utah did all three.
Yeah, Utah did do all three, and we think that's the right place to start. So it's defining these small PV systems as a new legal category and saying, hey, these systems are exempt from traditional interconnection agreements designed for rooftop systems 5 to 20 times as large.
And you think 1,200 watts is like works, is good. Do you have any, would you like to push that higher?
I think that there is some debate about what exactly is the limit, but no safety expert we've talked to has said that there is an issue with 1,200. They think that's pretty conservative.
So first thing, define these as a separate kind of product, and then two, exempt them from interconnection requirements.
That's right. And then with that comes ability to self-install, which is key.
Crucial.
This is going to stay super niche. This is going to be much more expensive if we don't allow that. And then in Utah, at least, the utilities asked for release of liability. We anticipate, state to state, a lot of utilities will ask for that as well.
And then also it says that you are asking that states exempt these small systems from net metering. I guess I wonder what that means. Like the amount they're feeding back into the grid, as discussed, is relatively trivial. Is the idea that the utilities just don't want to have to measure and pay for it? Basically, like, is that why they want these exempt?
Well, if you don't have interconnection, you don't have net metering.
Yeah,
I mean,
it just kind of comes along.
It's not. I mean, the Utah law does say net metering specifically, but in a way, it's redundant.
I see. So if you haven't done the interconnection thing with the utility, they're not measuring however much you feed back to the grid regardless. So
right.
Okay, so I did have a couple of kind of random final questions, just things that were on my mind. One is, and I think probably this is on a lot of listeners' minds, and maybe we should have gotten to it earlier, but just like, how much savings is this? Like, if I get if I'm an average, I don't know, household of, say I've got like 3 people in my apartment, parents and a kid, average 3-person, whatever, like, and I get one panel, am I offsetting 5% of my demand? 50%? 75%? You know what I mean? What is the sort of like magnitudes here, roughly?
The best data we have is from Germany, where we have so many users. So there, the average system is around 800 watts. And the data there shows that if it's oriented correctly, then we have about 15 to 20% offset. So we're not talking about, it'll never cover your entire energy demand, which is why it's grid tied. We're not talking about systems that will keep you going if you're in the middle of the woods.
This is a reduction of your bill, basically.
That's right.
So, of course, the amount of power you get out of it is going to depend on the sunniness of your atmosphere. And your payback time, of course, is going to depend also on your rates, what utility area you're in, et cetera, et cetera. But nowhere and in no context is this like, I'm going off grid type of stuff. This is just like an extra.
Yeah, I mean, there are systems that you can take off grid and do this with. They've been around for a long time. We're talking specifically, though, about a grid-tied system that those of us who live in civilization, is that an offensive way to put it? Those of us who live in the typical apartments, houses, most of us.
People in apartments have been excluded from so much of this fun stuff. So
absolutely. That's why we're doing this.
They deserve something. Now, I guess like for a given household, whether they want a battery, whether they want storage, kind of is like a separate calculation from this. But I'm just wondering, like in terms of the marketing and, and sort of the public impression of all this, is anyone trying to sort of like package batteries with this or tie this to storage somehow?
Yeah, absolutely. So the system in Utah that I've mentioned, they come with or without a battery. And, the analysis we do in the white paper is for batteryless systems. I mean, however, we do expect more and more people to adopt battery usage. There's so many benefits. Your utilization goes up. You have resilience. I mean, there are a million reasons to do it that way. But we see this as the fundamental step toward that for resilience for the millions of Americans who have no other options.
And that would, it seems to me, maybe from like the utilities perspective, like the battery would have the effect of preventing backfeed because it's just going to absorb all your extra, right? Insofar there's any safety concerns about this, like that would do the same thing, more or less, wouldn't it?
Theoretically, like let's use Utah as the example. I mean, theoretically, even if you have one of the systems with a battery, you could still backfeed a little bit.
Fill it up and then backfeed more, right?
Then backfeed more. There are ways to prevent that or to limit that or to set the amount that you want. But we think, again, those things should not be legislated.
And when you say battery or no battery, are the manufacturers integrating batteries physically in some way, or you just buy it with a battery next to it?
Well, so the one in Utah, you can buy it with or without, and it's a separate piece of hardware. So you would just add it to a system or not add it.
But theoretically, manufacturers could figure out fun ways of packaging these things together. If I have a house where I do have rooftop solar already, and so I have an interconnection agreement, etc., and I bring one of these and plug it in, I don't know. It doesn't change. It doesn't really change anything, does it?
Well, no, it does. It does in the sense. So we're doing this in California, actually, right now as we speak. So if you have a net metering agreement, then you can attach one of these and have it fall under that same net metering agreement, whether it's NEM 1, NEM 2, NEM 3, under a certain threshold. So in California, that's 1 kilowatt. So you can buy right now through us, actually, or another manufacturer, you can buy a system that's up to 1 kilowatt and plug it in, and it will be considered part of your net metering expansion.
I see.
So you do not need a new interconnection agreement.
Interesting. And so you could have a system that can island, right? Because you can't just have a plug-in thing that can island, but these could be part of an islandable system, theoretically.
If the rooftop system is set up that way.
Right. But the point is, like, if you have rooftop and you have all the agreements and all the everything, you can just slipstream one of these in basically under as like an adjunct part of the rooftop system, basically.
Actually, let me correct myself because the plug-in system is separate. So it has its own inverter, which is UL 1741. So that has anti-islanding capability as it stands. So that's why you don't need, for instance, a shutoff switch with these systems because it's already built into the inverter. So no, you can't have islanding from these systems in any case, as long as the inverter is UL 1741.
Interesting stuff. And so why have you guys decided, why are you selling product? why are you selling these things? What's going on there?
Well, so when we started Bright Saver, we did not imagine getting into legislation. We imagined ourselves. So we started with the vision of, hey, there's a huge group of Americans, low to moderate income renters who just have no options for on-site residential solar. So we started with this vision of like, hey, this is happening in Europe. Why can't it happen here? And we thought the barriers were a little different when we started this thing. We imagined ourselves sort of helping finance these units for folks who do not have access to great financing. But then when we started encountering the regulatory barriers, we just started learning that if we don't remove these barriers with legislation, it'll be constrained and expensive. So why are we doing this expansion? We're primarily doing it because it's fully legal. There's no question. There's no gray area. Even here in Northern California, where we're installing these things right now, soon Southern California too. So we just wanted to make sure that we were well within the bounds. And why do we sell them? We sell them because it's part of our theory of change. I mean, we don't think that we will get widespread adoption unless you can see them. Your neighbor has one. Pictures from Germany are good, but it's better to see folks in your neighborhood.
I do love them.
They're lovely.
I do so love them.
So that's why we sell product. But truly, I mean, we are a nonprofit. We see this as a way to generate revenue to fund our other mission-driven work.
I see. And I'm guessing like once this is legal in whatever 10 states or 20 and producers and manufacturers flood in, you're probably going to get out of that business. You're not going to like get in a competition race with.
Oh, no way. I mean, listen, my
or not.
No, my job is to put myself out of a job. I mean,
Right,
really,
exactly.
we want to get to that tipping point where we don't need a nonprofit driving this. This is a market-driven thing. And yeah, I think we will get out. There's no way for a company like ours or an organization like ours with American overhead, to be able to compete.
Yeah.
And we don't want to. We're here to make change. We're here to start a movement.
So if I'm in Utah and I don't need an interconnection and I don't need an electrician and I'm just going to buy a system that I can literally plug in myself, how much is the system just tag price?
Yeah, well, the costs keep going down. So I was on the call with a legislator yesterday, and we looked up the costs now in Utah for an 800-watt system without a battery. It's around $1,000.
Wow,
so it's quite cheap.
That's like a laptop or
Yeah, I mean, it's accessible to a totally different group of people just based on cost alone, let alone, are you a renter, a homeowner, et cetera.
So $1,000 and you see that only going down over time.
Oh, for sure. I mean, this is a very immature market in the United States. There's one manufacturer that's doing this. Yeah. Probably another one soon.
Like right now, I'm assuming because this market is relatively small, they're just using panels from elsewhere. But I've been sort of wondering, like, if this becomes a truly robust market, are they going to start making panels like of different sizes and different shapes? And you know what I mean? Like to fit into the home? Because right now, all the pictures I see are just like the very standard rooftop panels, just set in different places. But like, you could imagine different kinds of panels.
Sure. And in Germany, we have that. So we piloted a system like the one you're talking about. It was a very low wattage, 200-watt system, and it was a flexible panel.
Oh.
And it was smaller. I mean, it could be zip tied to a balcony. We were hoping actually to suction cup it to the inside of a south-facing window. Turned out we couldn't quite make that work with the weight. But listen, I was at an installation for a delightful 80-something-year-old woman who lifted the panel herself and oriented it. It was so lovely. So yes, we imagine that there is no limit to the use cases that can come out of this once a viable market exists.
Wild. What a fun time. What a fun time to see things unfolding. By way of taking us out, maybe, why don't you tell people, it sounds like, legislatively speaking, at the state level, this is a boulder rolling downhill. Like this thing, things are happening and things want this. But if people want to get involved, like, what should they do?
What should they do? And actually, I want to pick up on that a little bit because you asked how many states are we talking about? You're quite right. We have 5 that are public. You missed Maryland. We have 5 more that are for sure going to introduce this. We've talked to all the legislators. They've drafted their bills. They're just working their political magic behind the scenes before they're going to introduce. And by the way, a lot of them think they and are already on their way to getting bipartisan co-sponsorship, which we think is key because this can't be a blue state phenomenon or red state phenomenon. I mean, this really has to take off in a non-political way. And why should it be political? I mean, this is truly like bottom line, cheap energy, good investment, lower household expenses, do what you want in your backyard. I mean, we don't think it's a political thing at all.
I mean, it's just like word of mouth. Like this is like marketing wise for clean energy.
Totally.
This is just magic. This is magic stuff here. This is the sort of peer-to-peer, spreading of this stuff that you want to get going.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, in a way, it's the power of an idea. You know what I mean? We started talking about this. We weren't the first, but we have been speaking pretty loudly about it. And, the more people hear about it, the more excited they get. So we have 10 states we know are going to introduce.
Amazing.
We have another 20 that are considering it. So we really could in 2026, in just a few months, be in a position where half of the United States of America is considering doing this. And we think our odds are pretty good for getting it across to the finish line.
That is awesome. And is there any reason to have your eye on any federal legislation? I mean, it's from what I can tell, all we really want is for the feds to just stay out of this. Is there anything you want or need from the federal government?
Well, I mean, look, the feds could solve this with one stroke of a pen, or, this could be law at the federal level. We don't expect that for the next 3 years at least, for reasons that sort of confound us. There's been a war on the cheapest energy on the planet, full stop. We don't really understand it, but there's a lot we don't understand.
What a great way to fight back against that war. I mean, this is part of why I'm excited about this, is that I think people on the right have their media and politicians telling them that this stuff is all junk and unreliable, et cetera. And a lot of people in the clean energy world just don't have the media, don't have the access to those people to tell them otherwise. But this is like worth a million words. You know what I mean? Like, plug one of these into your wall, and like I think that does the work of a million arguments.
Yeah, and it's going to be a consumer-driven thing. It can't be yet because we're constrained by regulation, but this is not going to require subsidies. It's not going to require incentives. It's not going to require any political friends. It just requires regulation to get out of the way, and then consumers will push this forward, and it'll take off on market forces. And look, you can't argue with cheap. Cheap is not a political matter. So we think everybody will want some version, some way to make energy affordable. And we think this is a step. I mean, look, it's not the whole puzzle. You know that, I know that. But we think it's a real on-ramp, a real gateway drug, as you used the word drug earlier.
Yeah, it's just very visible and tangible in a way that a lot of this other stuff isn't.
100%. And that has value in a lot of ways. I mean,
Truly.
It's just, and then word of mouth, as you say. I mean, as soon as your neighbor says, hey, I cut my energy bill by this much by spending this much. I mean, then that's the tipping point we're going toward, David. I mean, that's what we have to reach. This has to be a rational economic choice for the consumer. It can't just be this niche, motivated out of the goodness of our hearts thing. And by the way, rooftop should be that way as well. So utility scale should be that way as well. I mean, this isn't an episode about soft costs. I know you've already talked about that, but
that's a whole other pod.
Yeah, but listen, I mean, this is a way to essentially take soft costs out completely because we're talking about self-installation here. Perhaps, yes, at first on a small scale, but it's not going to stay small. It's going to take off and it's going to be big.
Beautiful. Well, this is so exciting, Cora. I have to admit, I came to this subject sort of slightly fatalistic about our ability in the U.S. to do anything, basically. But like, this is all much more tangible and much closer to hand than I thought it was. Like, this is really happening, and there aren't really that many big barriers. Very exciting. So thank you for coming on and talking us through it.
Thank you so much. It's been so fun.
Thank you for listening to Volts. It takes a village to make this podcast work. Shout out especially to my super producer, Kyle McDonald, who makes me and my guests sound smart every week. And it is all supported entirely by listeners like you. So if you value conversations like this, please consider joining our community of paid subscribers at volts.wtf, or leaving a nice review, or telling a friend about Volts, or all three. Thanks so much, and I'll see you next time.